Hello, and welcome to Coffee Stain EDU podcast. This is your host, Geneva Rodriguez, and we are coming to you with episode 26, how to connect with your middle school and high school students. We have a special guest speaker here, which is my very good friend, Matthew Donohue. He's actually an high school educator. We're going to get into his introduction in a minute, but I'm going to start with what I usually say. This podcast is not edited. I record and I submit as is because I want to be authentic. I want to be real. I want to be myself. And I feel like people really appreciate that when they just get me for who I am and they get all the jibber jabber and whatever, right? Because I'm not perfect. I'm human. And I only speak from my truth, my experience, and from people that I've gained knowledge from, I guess, or whatever. So yeah, so what you get now is what you get. So I told him to be on his best behavior. So we'll see how that goes.
No cursing. I'm not allowed to hit on.
No cursing, not allowed to freaking flirt or whatever.
Can't do anything.
So anyway, our the video, not the video, I can't even talk right now. Our website is coffeestains.org. My Instagram is coffeestain_edu. You can listen to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. So me and my good friend, Mateo, was out today and we will be in Taurus in Brooklyn. And we started talking about our podcast. I have a podcast. He has a podcast and he's going to talk a little bit about his podcast too, because I'll use this platform as a way for you to promote that. And hopefully I'll be a guest on his podcast if he feels that I am worthy of it.
We'll see how today goes.
Shut up. So we started talking about different topics and I felt that it would be very important for him to come onto the podcast and talk about his experience with school, because he is experienced with working with middle school as well as high school, right? More high school level. My experience is with D75, as you guys are aware of, and then I am an elementary assistant principal. And I felt it was important because I want to meet the needs of all my listeners. And I do feel that it would be nice to get a perspective from a male educator as well as a high school educator. So I have a few questions that I want to ask him. And I hope that this will be information that you can take into your practices or you can share with someone else. But again, I love to talk. So I'll try to get straight to it, Stuart. I try to keep my episodes 25 minutes or less because I know we're all busy. We live in New York City and we have a lot going on. So the goal is to keep this episode 25 minutes or less, but if it goes over, I am sorry, but it's necessary. So we're going to go into Mateo introducing himself and talking about his journey as a educator. And then we'll go into some of the questions that I have for you. So go ahead.
So I've been an educator. I worked for New York City Department of Ed for 12 years. Prior to that, I worked in the Bronx at a GED center, helping people get their GED. And before that, I worked with incarcerated youth, an alternative to incarcerated youth. So, 18, 19, 20. What? That was outside of those two jobs, outside of district. So, I say all that to say, since I've been like 18, 19 years old, I've been involved with educating youth in New York City. Okay. And this past year I got hired in Long Island. So I left the city, but I have worked. I do miss the city a lot. Sometimes I regret it. I miss my students a lot. I miss the culture in New York City.
Ain't nothing like New York City, I tell you.
No, nothing at all. Nothing at all like New York City. So what was the question?
Talk about your journey.
So my journey. So I started off teaching in my first 4 years was District 79 in juvenile jail, Bronx Hope Pastors Academy in the Bronx. And then I worked for 3 or 4 years at it was a high school called New Directions in the Bronx, and that was for overage students. So we had a lot of students from the Dominican Republic, a lot of students who dropped out and re-enrolled. So I was teaching middle school classes and a middle school curriculum, but my students were 16, 17,
But were they getting their high school diploma, or were they getting like a GED?
They were working towards their high school diploma, but also because we had like we felt somewhere special where like we were able to like kind of give them extra credits and extra classes and try to accelerate their graduation. And then from there I went to 3 years at a traditional school in Queens in Ozone Park. And now this is my first year in Riverhead.
Okay, but tell me a little bit more about Queens. You just jumped right over that. That was 3
So
years in
Riverhead,
Queens.
I mean, in Queens, I'm sorry, Queens, Ozone Park. I absolutely loved my staff. I loved my coworkers. They were like the greatest people
What grades did you
in the
teach
world. I
there?
taught 9th and 12th grade.
Okay.
You know, then my last 3 years that my first year I taught 9th and 12th. Then I
Okay.
taught just 12 the last 3 years.
Okay. Okay.
And it was phenomenal.
Okay. So you've always been in education. Have you done any other careers outside of that? Is there
Yeah.
something else that you do now?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I'm actually I'm a life coach as well. You know,
Okay.
it's a beautiful job. It's something I really love doing and I'm passionate about. And I try to take a lot of the things I teach my clients and I try to teach it to my students.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's Mateo, and we're going to jump right into
Let's
the
do it.
topic. So the topic again is how to connect with your middle school and high school students. I said middle school because I feel like there are certain things, strategies and tips that we can use that we are using in high school that we can apply to middle school as well. Okay. Again, like I said, I don't edit this. I'm going as I'm just going with the flow. That topic, that title might change a little bit as we end the episode, but whatever. So it happens. Like I've recorded before and I'm just like, oh, I don't like the title that I gave, so I give something else.
Let's see
it's fine. Again, people appreciate the honesty, the realness, just me being authentic in how I do things. I think they make better connections like that, because again, like I don't want to pretend to be perfect.
You're pretty close.
Some people think I am.
Yeah, he is pretty close.
Oh, here we go. All right, let's focus. So, we have 3 points that we discussed and that we're going to cover. Okay. So the first point that Mateo said was, don't take yourself too seriously. Learn to laugh at your stuff and relate to students on their level by being real. Number 2 was show that you care about your students by going the extra mile and getting to know them. And you guys know that if you've been listening to my podcast, I talk a lot about relationships and building those relationships, not only with students, but with staff and with parents. So I love that he mentioned that as point number 2, because relationships is very important when you're in the educational system. And number 3 was being relevant by making connections. Okay. And he's going to talk about how he used real life situations, music, sports in his lessons and his approach to engaging students in the classroom, which I'm really excited about. And then, like you guys know, we're going to end the episode with a challenge for all the listeners. Okay.
I love that you ended in the challenge.
I know.
I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna start putting that in my podcast.
I think it's all right, because I want my listeners to get something out of every episode. You listen, you're busy, whatever, but I challenge you because I want you to be held accountable, right? That's the only way we're going to grow, right?
Yeah.
That's the only way we're gonna grow, is that if we're listening, we're learning, we're reading stuff, how are we applying it to our real life, right? So I love to challenge my listeners to apply something that I've mentioned in one of my episodes to their real life. But anyways, let's dive into number 1. What do you mean about don't take yourself too serious? And how do you learn to laugh and relate to your students on their level by being real?
So there's a lot of ways, right? Like, first of all, just to give you a little bit about my background. Majority of elementary school and parts of middle school, I was in special ed classes. I took speech classes until like 8th or 9th grade. And when I say special ed class, it wasn't like where they mix kids together. You know, it was like, I used to have to switch elementary schools every year. So for my first 4 years, I switched schools because not everybody would have those not ICT, the special classes, you know what I'm saying? And then I always thought I was the genius. So I grew up thinking I'm a genius because I'm smarter than all my classmates. And then I got transferred to like a general ed, and I realized I'm not that smart. You know, I went from like the top of my class to the bottom really fast. You know, so I say all that to say, like, I grew up kind of like I wasn't like academically smart. You know what I'm saying? I was never like one of those goody two shoes. You know, right. I used to get Dean's list, not Dean's list. I used to get sent to.
You're on the Dean's
no,
list,
not the Dean's list. I used to be on the Dean's other list.
I mean, sent to the Dean's class.
Yeah, I was in the other Dean's list, the not good ones. So, you know, I think that's like that's part of what makes me a special educator, because I come, and I'm not saying I'm the only one. I know a lot of my friends are also screw ups when they were growing up, and now I think a lot of times we're the ones that connect really well with the students, because I see where they're coming from. I'm like, I was like this too one day, like I struggled through school, you know what I'm saying? Like I had to, I'm not gonna say stuff I have to do to graduate, you know what I'm saying? Like we had our systems, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to my boy Christian, the only reason I passed my regents and whatever, you know what I'm saying? But I have my sister, so I recognize what it's like to struggle. So and I also have, like I said, part of my growing up, I had ADHD, which was undiagnosed. My mom didn't think like ADHD doesn't exist in Puerto Rico, you know what I'm saying? So if it doesn't exist there, it can't exist here. You know what I'm saying? So I remember telling her, Mom, like I think I have ADHD, like I can't keep up, I can't pay attention. She's like, no, you don't have it.
So is that how you related to your students, by being real, by realizing your own experiences in the educational system and applying that to when you were a teacher? So give me an example.
Yeah, so like when I see kids struggling, I know what it's like to struggle. You know what I'm saying?
There you go.
And I'm also very transparent. Like I'll share my background with my students. Like I'll tell them. I'm like, yo, I grew up in speech class. I grew up in special ed. I grew up struggling.
Which is very important for kids at that age level, right? Because in elementary is all right, you're told that you have to listen to the adult. You have to do that, whatever. But when you get to that middle school, you're going through those different changes in your life. You're going through those hormonal changes. You get to high school, you're kind of trying to figure out yourself. You're trying to find a place in life. So then you have these adults trying to tell you, all right, you got to do X, Y, and Z. Nah, like I'm not with it. Like you have the defiance in you, right? Those are the stage that you're in at that moment. So when you have an educator that you can connect to, right? It's a male educator or educator of color or whatever, and they're making a connection with you like, hey, like I've been there, I've struggled, or I've walked this path, whatever, right? Like that helps you make those connections with the kids, and it helps them see you as a real person.
Absolutely.
Not as this person that is like on this pedestal, right? We always tend to see teachers, even us as when we were in classes, we always saw our teachers as they're on this pedestal, they're perfect, they don't make mistakes. But when you are in a high school level or middle school level, you make those connections with the kids, it makes you real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I let them know, like, I do have ADHD. I tried medicine and I did not like the way it made me feel at all. You know, so there's systems I put in place to help me cope, but sometimes I still mess up. Like I'll forget to post the assignment on Google Classroom, and I'll be like, oh, go do the assignment on the and the kids be like, oh, you didn't post anything. Like, oh, there's that ADHD again. And you know what I'm saying? So I make fun of myself in front of my students. So
I think he needs to listen to the episode that talked about being an organized educator, right?
Yeah, like I mean, it's happened. I'm not proud of it, but there's been times I've lost kids like reports. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, you know, but I make fun of myself. So instead of being like, oh, you know, I got lost,
like
something, I'll be like, I messed up. I lost.
Trying to like portray this image of being perfect, right? Like they don't make mistakes, that they're in this role and they're here to guide you or lead you, and they don't make mistakes. And that's not realistic, especially with middle school and high school. They need to see you as a human. They need to see you as a person, right? So my question for you would be, because you're talking about like you being real, you making fun of yourself, you making mistakes. And again, you have to be prepared. You have to be professional, right? So you forgetting to upload a grade, right? Like that's not so professional, right?
It's not professional.
It's not professional, right? So my question for you would, how can you be real with your students, but also maintain a level of professionalism?
So I think even that's like a life lesson, right? Like, like I'm not perfect. Like I forget stuff. So like you forget stuff, I forget stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, The only thing is, as long as we're trying to work on ourselves and we're trying to put systems in place. So you know, sometimes like I'll do something and there's been almost like the students will like clap for me. Oh, you remember Mr. D, and like they'll like celebrate. You know what I'm saying? And I think that kind of goes to like another kind of just segue a little bit, you know, just not taking myself serious. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes a kid will crack a joke. And I think one of the worst things you could do as a teacher, if somebody cracks a joke on you, to get like defensive and angry. Because then that's just a green light where they're going to roast you for the rest of the school. Not the week, the year. They're going to keep going and going.
Because even in elementary, they're already roasting. Like we've heard that term in elementary. What are you talking about roasting? Like, are we roasting each other? Blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
No. Right. But also, you know, realizing that in a middle school and a high school level, you make that mistake, right? And also showing that, yes, you can make a mistake and you could be human, but also holding yourself accountable, and also showing them that there's consequences for that, right? Because they can apply that to their life. If you forget an assignment, or you forget to do a test, you forget to upload something, whatever, like if it's on Classroom, Google Classroom or whatever, or you forget to study for a test, there's consequences.
There are consequences.
Right. So like, while you can laugh about it and say, hey, okay, haha, I'm human, I make mistakes, and your kids can say you make mistakes and they see that, but also that can be a lesson that you can teach your students and teach yourself, that we're gonna be held accountable for our actions and the lack of. So that also teaches them a level of maturity and professionalism. Do you agree?
100%. And I had my last year in Queens,
Yeah.
right? So I realized I had these issues. I'm trying to, be more organized and whatever. So I had, shout out to like my girl Killer Carol. You know what I'm saying? Killer Carol.
I don't know you, but shout out.
Killer Carol was one of the great. She gave me, like, on Father's Day, she gave me such a beautiful card, and she made me cry. She just got a special place. So what she used to do each month, she used to help me fill out my calendar. Like, she color coded my calendar on my desk for me. Like, I felt like I was my little secretary. And I'm like, yo, thank God, Killer Carol like held me down.
So Killer Carol, thank you, because you have a very valuable skill that's going to help you in the real world. And you also taught someone that needs to get his shit together.
I think
How that was one, a little curse. Get his stuff together. So that's a very valuable skill that you have. So good. But I want to keep going on because we have 2 more points.
So before
to
we go on, really quickly, I'm sorry. So with the I got like a little, like, we got a little, it's whatever. Don't worry about it. I don't want to throw blame. You know what I'm saying? But part 2 of the not taking yourself seriously, like when they make fun of you, it's something I started doing, which might be controversial, but like, I roast them back. You know what I'm saying? So they talk trash to me, like, I talk trash back. And then, like, it depends on the level they went to, where, like, I mean, I've talked about their moms before. Like,
oh my God.
So
there's a fine line.
No, but that's too far. But
there's a fine line.
I say that to say, like, the relationships I built with them makes that okay, where they just laugh. Oh, okay, like, but I wouldn't do that to, like, September 9th, the first day of school. I'm not talking, but
because you're having those.
No, but by that point, like, they're gonna roast me. They know I'm gonna talk, like.
So that shows that you've built those relationships, which goes into the next topic, right? About showing that you care about your students and going the extra mile to get to know them, right? So like he just said, you're not going to do that first week of school. You're going to be very mindful of that, and you're going to get a feel of your students and get to learn your students before you start roasting them. They roast you, right? Because it takes a level of comfort for them to feel comfortable with roasting you and saying certain things about you, because they're not sure, is he going to be okay with this? Is he going to take it or whatever? And also, and your students and knowing, okay, Tamika can get that. Robert is not going to get that. Jessica's probably going to get that, right? Like, so it takes.
Jessica might snitch. You know what I'm saying?
Jessica might snitch on you. Robert might be cool with that because he might come at you. And Tamika might be like, oh, whatever, right? So like, it's all about, like you said, getting to know your students. So that goes into showing you care about your students by going the extra mile. That's point 2 that Mateo mentioned. And my question for you would be, give an example of when you went the extra mile for a student, and how did that help them succeed?
So there's a lot of different ways, right? And it's kind of like uncomfortable because I mean this in a super humble way, right? But I've done like so many amazing things to my students.
Okay.
Where like I feel uncomfortable like bragging about it. Like I don't want it to be a bragging thing, but some like examples.
Share extra mile.
So one time I had a student who I already had a good relationship with, you know what I'm saying? And I had overheard a conversation that he had, how, his parents or his family, like nobody did anything for his birthday, and how sad he was. You know what I'm saying? So I went out and he was on the basketball team. So I went out and got him like a basketball related gift. And I brought a cake in, and I invited like all his little homeboys to come over, and all the kids from the basketball team, and we cut the cake for him. We had like our own little party. And like what that turned into, I know like in elementary schools it's kind of like normal.
Yeah, we get cakes.
In high school. So what happened? So the school I was at had about 100 kids in graduating class, and I taught all the kids in like I would teach like on that particular grade. So I taught all about 100 kids.
Right.
And so in the whole school is like 400, super small school. So each month, so like October, me and my co-teacher, Miss Forrester, shout out to Robin Forrester, I love Robin like a little
You
sister.
better listen to this since you shouted her out.
She was such, an amazing person to work with. We had such a connection, and our philosophy was the same in education, which worked out perfectly.
Okay.
So once a month, like, so in October, in the middle of October, we'd have all the October birthdays.
Nice.
And we buy like a big cake from Costco,
Right.
which only really cost $30.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And maybe one or two
But
other teachers would chip in.
That was the extra mile.
And that's it. And then we cut it up, and all the seniors that wanted to come would come,
Right.
and we'd have balloons and during
Right.
the lunch period, and something really special
Right.
like that.
So can you tie that into how did that help students succeed? Why do you think that is such a big, important part of students succeeding as your student, right?
So I think,
why do you think, where's the connection?
The connection is like an indirect connection, I think, because students always want to do better, and students always perform better, and students feel more motivated when they're with a teacher they really like, or that they feel this teacher really cares about me. He goes above and beyond for me.
Right.
He loves us.
Right.
He treats us like we're family.
Right.
So once they feel that connection,
Yeah.
they're gonna show up, and they're gonna be ready to learn and participate.
I don't have the data for that, but that's true, and that's proof. Like, I've heard that in my teaching fellows program, I heard that in my leadership program, and I constantly hear that when I go to PDs right now as a school leader. Students don't learn from people they don't like. Okay. And I'm drawing a blank with the woman that said that. She passed away. May she rest in peace. But oh my God, what's her name? Yeah, she was a big deal. She had like a whole TED talk or whatever. I'm sure I'm gonna remember it in a minute or whatever. But she said students don't learn from people they do not like.
That's it. It doesn't matter how good your pedagogy is.
Right? Like, you could be perfect on a resume. You could be perfect when it comes to your what you bring to the table. But if you ain't making that connection, you're not building those relationships with the students, you could toss that out the window. It's basura, okay? Trash.
I love that.
Right?
That's English.
All right. So that is true. So that's, going the extra mile. And I love how you mentioned that in elementary, that's a natural thing. Buying cake, having parents come up with this and that, teachers throwing that. In middle school and high school, you don't get that. And think about the kids at home. You think they get that from their parents? Probably not.
Not everybody.
And depending on what demographics you teach, right? What community you work in, these kids might not ever get a birthday cake. They might not ever get a happy birthday. They might not ever get any recognition for that. But for you, it might be a simple, I'm just getting a cake, I'm saying happy birthday, right? But for them, that was such a big deal.
$15.
That is
$15
is a life-changing
for some kids.
situation, right? Like, a decision that he made, and for $15 made such a change for that student, and he forever is going to look at you as this person that made such a change in his life.
And just to tackle before I know you want to get to the third point pretty soon. So I
think we're going over 25 minutes.
No, but you know what?
Like,
it might be. I love
He
to hear myself voice. I love to hear my own voice.
We're going to your podcast.
What's up? Yeah. Hashtag the Sultan, the coach.
And I feel talk about it during.
Yeah, you know what? I don't want to steal your shine. You know what I'm saying? But
my shine, because it's there no matter what.
Yeah. So my podcast was all a dream, and that was inspired by Biggie. It really was all a dream. The way I am right now, the confidence I've gained, and the way I see life. I never dreamed 2 or 3 years ago, and that's something we could talk about. Maybe I'll be back in the podcast.
Maybe.
You know what I'm saying?
If you're
but
on good behavior.
Yeah, but that, you know what I'm saying? So I think the way I am right now, I never dreamed of this. So it was all a
Right.
dream to be like this. It's really cool. So check me out on IG, the Salty and Lit Coach. On YouTube, look us up. It was all a dream with the Odd Squad. But just to tack on to this point, and again, it's uncomfortable talking about it because I hate to feel like I'm bragging. You know what I'm saying? Even the Bible says when you give with your right, don't let your left hand know what you're giving.
No,
you know what I'm saying? So
right.
I say this in the most humble way possible, but like I would go to students kind of like extracurricular activities like outside of school. First of all, I was involved with the basketball program, so I'd go to all the basketball games, and just so traveling around Queens and Brooklyn with a group of kids, and sometimes afterwards like 4 or 5 of them I knew came from bad situations, you know what I'm saying? So we'd be
Yeah.
walking back to school, I'm like, yo, let's stop at, Popeyes, so let's stop and,
Yeah.
that pizza, what's the $5 pizza place?
Little Caesars.
Little Caesars, you know what I'm saying? And so again, this is cost me like $5-10. And
it's such a
but to these kids,
difference.
you know what I'm saying? So now these kids are graduated. All the kids I taught last year,
Yeah.
which I had the honor of being with the same group of kids,
Yeah.
through their whole high school career.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They still hit me up. There's one game. So during our lunch breaks, I would invite the kids up and, maybe 5 or 6 of us would play dominoes.
Right.
And one, there's two people that graduated and now we still play dominoes every day, like on our phones, you know what I'm saying? So we keep in touch. And then there's like 5 or 6 other kids.
Well, that's going to be the challenge later, right? Like how they can make those connections with students. But I love how you brought that up here. Like going the extra mile, and for you, it might not be an extra mile, but for those kids, it might.
It means everything.
Looks like that, right? So going
showing up for them because they don't. Some people don't have anybody showing up.
They have parents. You got to be mindful of the community that you serve, and you got to be mindful of the parents or the lack of parents and the caregivers and what they can do for these kids, right? And if you can be that supplement, or you can be that person that can show up for them, do it, because it goes such a long way. And they might not have a parent that can show up at a basketball game, or a parent that can show up at parent teachers conference, or a parent that can show up just to show up. And you can be that teacher and you can make that difference in their life. There's
been kids who've said, you're the first person that told me like they love me. You're the first person who told me they're proud of me. You're the first person who I felt went above and beyond for me. And obviously that makes me feel good, like I did something great, but then it also makes me empathize.
It's
like,
so sad.
where are they coming from that this kid's 17 years old and nobody said, I love you, or I'm proud of you, or you're a good kid.
Understand the community you serve and what they get and what they don't get. And that's all about building those connections with your students on an individual level, right? And I spoke about that in episode 25. Well, you weren't there, but episode 25 talks about meeting your students where they are and building those connections and using surveys to try to get to know your students, because that's going to help you make those connections with them. And if you're on a middle school level and a high school level, that's going to help you on another level. Like Mateo's just saying right now, like you can do those little things that might be $5 for you or $15 for you, but that's going to make such a life difference, a change for those students. Let's go into point number 3, because we're going way over our time because he likes to talk. So
I do have a nice.
So you want to be relevant with your students and to your students by making connections to them. And this is this is important on any level that you teach at, whether it's if it's at a daycare center, if it's at an elementary level, it's middle school, high school, if it's a GED program, wherever you at, you want to make connections and you want to be relevant to what's going on in that child's life. And I wanted to ask you, give me an example of when you made a connection, or how have you made a connection in your lessons?
All right. So first of all, it was a lot easier when I first started teaching because my students had the same taste like in music as I did. You know what I'm saying? So we listened to like the same type of music.
Like what?
Like they knew who Biggie was, they knew about Nas and Big Pun.
Right.
I'm saying now these kids are talking about little whoever. I'm like, I have no clue. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I feel like now the disconnect has grown in music. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of them still recognize like Biggie. Obviously, is a legend. You know, we thank God. I saw a statue today. I was so happy. You know what I'm saying? So when I teach poetry, right, or teaching figurative language, we listen to Who Shot You. And I get like a little edited version, and I print out the lyrics, and then like the imagery and the everything in there, like your heartbeat sounds like Sasquatch feet, thundering, shaking the concrete. You know what I'm saying? So you could break that down.
That was actually on the statue today.
That's
your heartbeat was like
really, yeah. I didn't know that. I didn't even notice that. So then we just break down like shaking the concrete. That's a hyperbole. You know what I'm saying? Like I can hear the sweat skills within hip hop. Yeah. I can hear the sweat trickling down your cheek. And I'm like, yo, you can never hear that. That's like that just shows how scared this person is. Right. You know what I'm saying? So the imagery and everything in that, I think it's the first verse is so beautiful to teach in poetry. And this past year we're doing like criminal justice unit, and it was like it was about OJ Simpson, and a lot of people, a lot of the students couldn't really like relate to OJ Simpson. Like even for us, like
Right.
you know, I'm about to be 40 this year. You know what I'm saying? So OJ, I don't even really remember him playing,
Right.
but I remember the references to him. I remember him from Naked Gun, and
Yeah.
you know, he was in commercials and movies. So
Right.
like I knew who he was. But to get these kids excited about OJ Simpson, even the kids who like sports didn't really have like a frame of reference for
Right.
OJ Simpson. And I couldn't get them interested. I'm trying to think of the connection. Then I realized we're watching this documentary,
Yeah.
and I saw Robert Kardashian. And I remember like, oh, you know, I paused the video and I'm like, yo, you know who this man is right here? I pointed to, and they're like, no. And I'm like, yo, that's Robert Kardashian. And they're like, who's Robert Kardashian? I'm like, that's Kim, that's Kim's dad, that's Chloe's dad, that's Courtney's dad.
Yeah.
And once I said that, and I didn't think like I don't know how relevant, you know, the Kardashians are, you know, so I thought maybe like 30, 40, 50% might get it. And like after I said it, 95% of the class was like, oh my God, that's Kim's dad. And then all of a sudden they got into the OJ Simpson stuff. You know what I'm saying? So we're reading like a Shakespeare poem, and I connected it to You. You know, I know you know You on Netflix.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like how Joe's like,
that show,
you know, killing people he loved it. So we're able to make once you make those connections, and something else I was telling her earlier today about, you know, my interview for the school I'm currently at. Like I related you know, I believe it's signed at 116 by William Shakespeare, my man Billy Shakes. You know, and he's talking about like how ugly his wife is. You know, she's so ugly. Like I hear her voice and it like hurts my ears, and it's really like the whole poem. He's like insulting her. He's like, but I still love her. You know what I'm saying? And like the main message, even though I think it was really like disgusting, was kind of like, is like, you know, inner beauty is more important than outer beauty, right? So then I played a song. It's like a Jamaican song. A lot of you probably heard it. Was like, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, you got to make an ugly woman your wife. And again, it sounds crazy, but the kids hear it and like, yo, what did he just say?
Right.
And then they get really into it. You know, you can make those connections. So sometimes I feel like what makes me special as an educator, I think what can make anybody special is like just going outside the box and pushing that line like as far as it can go. You know what I'm saying? Like just sometimes we got to cross over the line. That might not be a great thing, but
I mean,
get close to the line.
I like how you said think outside the box, because I feel like a lot of teachers are scared to do that and they play it safe. And they stick to what the curriculum says and what the lesson says, and they don't take the chance of making those connections with real life situations, right? You want students engaged, you want to pull students into the lesson, you want to help them better understand what you're teaching them, make a connection to what's going on. Like music, TV shows, right? Like those are perfect things to make connections to.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, so I just try to find any pop culture reference and anything I connect it to and get them excited. You know, it is and what I just want to finish with this, like not to be corny, but I think it's such like, it's a beautiful thing when you could actually like see a light bulb go off in a kid's head where a kid can't understand something and you could find something to make it like relevant or to make that connection. And then you could see the face they make when when it clicks in the head, how it lights up. It really is like a light bulb, and it's such a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing, because even as a school leader now, I mean, I was in the classroom not that long ago, and I used to always try to make connections to what was going on in that child's life. And I made it a priority to me that when I prepared a lesson, I tried to make a connection to what those kids were experiencing in their daily lives, because that draws them in. And then, like you said, it makes a light bulb go off in their head. Like, oh, snap, I understand what she's saying. I know what she's saying. Yeah, I saw that in the bodega. Oh, I saw that in my park. Or I saw this. Or I experienced that at home. So that is definitely like, as an administrator now, when I go into classrooms, when teachers make those connections, and especially in the school that I work at, we serve such a diverse community. So when teachers are going above and beyond to make connections and to learn those students' communities and cultures and traditions, and they bring that into the classroom, like you just said, it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. And it brings us, well, I know it brings me as a leader so much joy to know that teachers are going above and beyond and showing an interest in that child's upbringing and bringing that in and tying it into education.
Absolutely.
Like, that's beautiful. So, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I think that was really good. The 3 points that we covered. Like we said, don't take yourself too serious, and making connections and relating to students on their level. We talked about how you can show you care about your students, about going above and beyond. I mean, how you can go above and beyond for your students. We also spoke about how you could be relevant and make connections with your students in the classroom. And we're going to end this episode how we end all episodes, and we're going to talk about a challenge. So Mateo's going to end the episode with a challenge, and then I'm going to do my little wrapping up, and we're going to end the episode.
I feel like Mariano Rivera closing it out. There's a lot of pressure right now. But the challenge I want to give you guys is just, try to spend maybe like one of your lunch periods a month. At minimum. I mean, if you feel obligated to do more, or you feel inspired to do more,
Inspired, I like that.
You could do more, obviously, but maybe one lunch period a month. Do something with some of your students like that. It could be like I used to play, 2 or 3 days a week on my lunch break. I play dominoes with my students, or I play spit. When I was in jail, we used to play Palace, which unfortunately is only like it's really like
he wasn't in jail. He taught.
I taught in
jail, right? Let's
just
clarify.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. But only students, only people who were in jail know the game Palace. You know what I'm saying? Palace is the dopest card game ever.
Okay.
Focus
on the challenge.
Okay, the challenge. So I'm coming back. I challenge you to give up one lunch period a month where you're engaging with your students. Whether it could be cards, it could be dominoes, it could be something else. Like maybe if you put like a Google survey, something like your students want to do or they like to do,
right?
And just spend like one day a month. That's all it takes. 45 minutes of your life.
It's gonna make such a big difference.
Yeah, I feel like the students are gonna know he's giving up his free time to spend time with, or she's. Right. I said he. I'm sexist. He/she.
He or she.
He or she or they. Spending time. Their free time with me, and that's just gonna make them feel special.
Right. I love that challenge. Thank you for challenging my listeners to do that.
Just for the record, I came up with 3 different challenges that she shut down. So that it took a lot of work to come up with that challenge.
Let me tell you why, before we wrap this up, because we already went way over our time. Because I always say in every episode, I try to cater to all my listeners, right? I don't want to have just one. I don't want to have a challenge that caters to one audience, right? So I had to prepare him for this challenge, and I needed him to be prepared and have a challenge ready for all listeners.
She was very thorough.
Not only middle school or high school, but also if you work in the city, if you work in the suburbs. There you go. If you work wherever, this challenge should be able to. You should be able to apply.
Anybody can do
right?
this challenge.
And like he said, it might not be cards that your kids want to play. It might not be games that your kids want to play. So episode 25, episode 25 mentions how you should survey your students. And that survey can also be a tool you use for a way you can connect with your students.
Absolutely.
So you might want to add in that survey, when you survey your students in the first couple of weeks of school, what are some activities, your preferred activities? What do you like to do? You like to read? Do you like to write? Do you like to dance? Do you like to listen to music? Do you like to draw? Right? There's a lot of ways you can connect with your students. And while playing cards and dominoes and games might have worked for Mateo, that might not work for your kids. This is why I had him tweak the challenge so that it caters to all listeners, because that is my goal. But anyways, I'm going to wrap up episode 26 right now of how to connect with your high school and middle school students. This is Geneva Rodriguez, your host of Co-op State EDU podcast. We had Mateo as a guest speaker here, and I want to thank you for your time and your knowledge and your expertise in this topic. I feel like it was very helpful, and I feel that he provided a lot of tips and advice on how you can move forward in providing and I'm connecting with your students. So I hope you're able to take this into the next school year and challenge yourself to connect with your students on a deeper and meaningful level. And again, you can find us on Instagram, which is coffeestain_edu podcast. I'm sorry, coffeestain_edu.
And I am
Go ahead.
the salty and lit coach
Salty and lit
on IG. And if you guys want to check out my podcast, which we're gonna get Geneva on right after this episode is done filming, is called It Was All a Dream with the Odd Squad.
Yes. And our website is www.coffeestains.org. And thank you for joining us. Again, if you have any feedback, any suggestions on episodes, you can reach out to me at GenevaRodriguez30@gmail.com. And
AP Rodriguez, thank you for having me. I had a great time, guys. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Peace and blessings.